Imagine opening your front door and finding a stranger covered in dust and a frightened little girl hiding behind him. That's what happened to Laura, a lonely widow living on the most isolated ranch in Montana. But what seemed like just a request for shelter for the night was actually the beginning of a silent war against a mafia that destroys families, steals land, and silences truths buried for decades. And in the midst of it all, an unexpected bond emerges, capable of awakening feelings she had sworn never to feel again. It doesn't go away, because what begins with an old pickup truck on the road ends with a trial that will decide the future of 3 lives, and maybe even hers. It all began on a gravel road forgotten by maps, on an afternoon when the wind seemed to carry more than dust. It was early autumn in Montana, 2023, but the smell of wet wood and burning pines still brought back memories from decades ago. If you enjoy stories that touch the soul, full of emotion, new beginnings, and twists and turns, subscribe to the channel right now and tell me which city or country you're watching from. I want to know where this story will go. I promise to always deliver intense, inspiring, and unforgettable stories. Now take a deep breath and hold on tight, because this story will touch your heart. Laura Grant hadn't seen anyone arrive at her gate in almost 3 years. Silver Creek Ranch, inherited from her father in 1995, was halfway between Missoula and nothingness. There, time moved slower, and loneliness had already become part of the furniture. Her old 1981 Ford F-100 pickup sat idle in the shade of the shed, used only when the ranch's AM radio announced storms. The house was solid wood, heated by a wood stove and lit by bulbs strung on thick wires, as if electricity were a gift from the previous decade. And it was there, among crooked fences and unlit tracks, that she had lived alone since her mother's funeral. Until that afternoon, the sound came before the image, tires squealing on gravel, the engine muffled by the dry wind. Laura looked up from the fence she was trying to reinforce with barbed wire, wiped the sweat with her cuff, and squinted against the setting sun. An old, brown, dusty Chevrolet pickup truck approached slowly. The engine coughed as if apologizing for interrupting the silence. She didn't move until the vehicle stopped on the other side of the gate. 2 figures emerged, a man with slow steps and a small girl clutching a blanket in her arms as if protecting a secret. Travis Dean politely removed his hat and held it to his chest. His boots were dirty from the road. His denim jacket was warm with age, and he had the expression of someone who's seen a lot, but still refuses to give up. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the wind. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. My name's Travis. This is Lily, my daughter. We're just looking for shelter for the night." Laura didn't answer. She just leaned her tool against the fence, glanced at the truck, then at the girl. The girl had large, shy eyes and carried on her thin shoulders a fragility that only those who have lost something understand. "This road isn't the gateway to anywhere," she said finally. Her voice was firm, but not arrogant. "Whoever comes here wants to get there." Travis nodded. "I heard about Silver Creek back in Lolo. They said you've been running it all yourself since your father passed away. I thought maybe you could use a hand for a while." Laura crossed her arms. The old radio inside the house crackled, mixing hiss with a forgotten country song. The smell of hay and wet wood danced in the air. The silence between them seemed to measure every inch of trust. The girl didn't speak, but her gaze spoke volumes. She fixed her eyes on Laura as if searching for some trace of security. Laura tried to look away, but her stomach tightened. The girl seemed like someone who'd already learned too much at such a young age. "Is there food?" Travis asked, looking. At the house behind her, we're not asking for luxury, just a roof over her head. The woman hesitated. Then she took a deep breath and pointed with her chin. "The back room is empty, but only for one night." Travis sighed in relief. We appreciate it, sincerely. The interior of the house was simple but cozy. Handmade pine furniture, a large radio, with a patched antenna in the corner of the living room, and a cast iron stove in the center, still warm from the wood that had been burning since noon. Laura lit a lamp and led the two of them to the bedroom. Lily clutched her blanket tightly, but before entering, she turned and stared at Laura for a second, as if she wanted to say something, but then she just lowered her head and entered. The door closed slowly, with an ancient creak that echoed through the house like a warning. Alone again in the living room, Laura lit the stove and put a pot of beef stew on the stove. Her thoughts were in chaos, but her movements remained automatic. She had always known how to live alone. She had learned since she was 17 not to depend on anyone, not on time, not on promises, much less on strangers with sad eyes and silent daughters. But something about that night, about that simple request, seemed to stir something she had buried along with her youth. As the pot boiled, she watched through the window as the sky darkened behind the mountains. The stars still hadn't dared to appear. The fog crept in slowly, creeping, covering the pasture like a premonition. Laura closed her eyes for a moment. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear of attachment. Because deep down she knew those who appear suddenly can also disappear just as suddenly. And what you take isn't always just space. Sometimes it takes silence too. And with it, all the protection we've built. The dining table creaked under the weight of years and silence. The stew was still steaming as Laura served 3 plates with hands too steady for someone pretending not to care. Travis nodded his thanks, and Lily, sitting at the head of the table, clasped her hands before eating, her eyes closed briefly. When she opened them, she looked directly at Laura and said in a low but clear voice, "Thank you, ma'am. This is very delicious." It was only 5 words. But in that instant, Laura felt something inside her tremble, like a window opening by itself in the middle of the night. The girl ate slowly, politely, without asking for anything. Travis watched everything with the attention of a father carrying unseen guilt. Laura tried not to look, but it was hard not to notice the way Lily held her posture, as if she'd learned too early not to take up space. Laura's spoon paused in midair for a second. In that girl, she saw an old reflex. She remembered herself at 9, sitting in front of her grandmother, trying to eat quietly, while the rain beat against the tin roof tiles of the old house where she grew up. And for a second, the pain reached across the years and returned, vivid, hot, uncomfortable. "She's a good girl," Travis commented suddenly, his deep voice gently breaking the silence. "He doesn't say much, but he feels everything." Laura nodded without looking. "She looks older than she is," Travis sighed. "He lost his mother early. Since then, he has days when he seems to carry more than he should." He looked at his daughter with quiet tenderness. "I try to do what I can." Laura didn't answer. She was used to men who talked too much and did too little. But Travis, he didn't say anything that wasn't necessary. And that, for some reason, was more dangerous. After dinner, Travis collected the dishes and carried them to the sink. Laura watched in silence, surprised by how naturally he moved inside, as if that simple gesture, washing dishes in a place that wasn't his, said more than any empty promise. "If you want, I can help with the animals tomorrow morning," he said, rinsing the dishes carefully. "I have calloused hands. I'm not one to sit still." Laura dried her hands with a cloth and replied without emotion, "There's a cow that kicks when she's in a bad mood. If you don't mind risking a tooth, you can try." He laughed, and for a moment, the sound of his laughter filled the kitchen, as if opening the windows Laura had kept locked for years. Lily, sitting on a stool near the stove, hugged the blanket to her chest and watched them both with attentive eyes. When Lavra met her gaze, she smiled slightly. "Good evening, ma'am," she said sweetly as she stood. Lavra opened her mouth to correct him, to say that ma'am made her sound older than she felt, but she couldn't. Said that way, it sounded like respect, like affection. The night wore on slowly. After Travis tucked Lily into bed with a kiss on her forehead and a whispered, "I'm here," he returned to the living room. Laura lit the lamp and sat there in her father's rocking chair. There was no television, just the radio playing an old Willie Nelson song, mixed with the sound of the wind outside. "She felt safe with you today," Travis said, fiddling with his cap. "And that doesn't happen often," Lavra swallowed. "I don't know what I did." He replied, "Sometimes just being there is all someone needs." It was a compliment disguised as an acknowledgement, but it moved her. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was a pause filled with things unsaid, looks that spoke of loss, of long journeys, of fears no one understands except those who have felt the ground disappear beneath their feet. Lavra felt her chest tighten, but it wasn't like other times. It wasn't longing or loneliness. It was something else, something new, something that hurt, because it was being born. When Travis went to his room, Lavra was left alone in the living room, staring at the closed door as if it too hid too many questions. She grabbed a blanket, settled on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. It was too early to trust, too early to feel what she was feeling. But there was no denying it. There was something there, something that might not have a name, but that began in silence and grew. Outside, the wind calmed. The moon peeked through the clouds, illuminating the roof of the old house. The ranch was still hers. The pain was still hers. But for the first time, more than one breath filled the space. For the first time, she wasn't sleeping alone. And that, no matter how much she tried to avoid it, made a difference. The noise came before the cold. The barn roof groaned as if it were about to split in half, and Laura woke with her heart pounding. She sat on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket, the dim light from the lantern casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, driving snow furiously against the windows. She pulled on her boots, grabbed her wool coat, and ran outside, the porch light illuminating the flakes that fell thick and heavy, covering the earth urgently. And then she heard it again. The crack. It wasn't just the wind. It was the barn, crying out for help. In 1992, she was 14 when she lost her father. He had left early that day, driving his old truck toward the mountains, where he monitored the logging areas. He said he would be back before lunch. But when night fell and he didn't show up, Lavra knew something was wrong. The local radio announced that a truck had been found in Bear Ridge Pass, overturned and destroyed. His body was inside. The official report said he lost control on the icy road, but Lavra never believed it. Her father knew every curve of that mountain, like he knew the grooves in his own hand. Back in the present, Lavra crossed the yard, fighting the biting wind. She saw Travis's shadow moving toward the barn, already dressed, holding a flashlight and a toolbox. "The roof's caving," she shouted over the noise. He nodded, wasting no time. They climbed up the side on the old ladder, the steps creaking under the weight and ice. The two worked in silence, like soldiers in separate trenches, hammering boards, and trying to hold the chaos together with nails and faith. The slippery wood was treacherous, the strong wind knocking the breath out of them. Lavra bent down to steady one of the metal sheets, which was flapping loosely. The nail wouldn't go. In, her wet glove slipped, and then the ground disappeared. A crack, a muffled scream, a foot sinking, and the wood giving way without warning. Lavra slipped under her own weight, the void opening up beneath her. But before she could fall, a firm hand grabbed her wrist tightly. "Lavra!" Travis shouted. She hung in the air, her boots banging against the barn wall, the wind tearing at words she didn't even know she was saying. But he held on tight, so tight it hurt. Her eyes met his. Between the wind and the fear, there was a silence heavy, deep, eternal. Travis pulled her with all his strength. When he finally brought her up, they both fell onto the roof, side by side, panting, their chests heaving violently. The snow continued to fall, but for a moment, it was as if time had stopped. Lavra looked at him with wide eyes, her face wet, whether from ice or tears, I couldn't tell. "Thank you," she murmured. He just shook his head. "I wasn't going to let you fall." Lying there, under the white, furious sky, she felt his arm brush against hers. Warm, safe, human. It had been years since anyone had held her so firmly, without hurting, without demanding, without trying to fix her. Just holding. Lavra didn't know what to do with that feeling. It was as if her body was asking for rest, but her heart was screaming for warning. She didn't trust men. Not after what she'd seen, what she'd experienced. But Travis didn't seem to be trying to get in. He just wouldn't leave. And that was more dangerous than any seduction. They descended in silence. The barn would weather the storm, at least for one more night. When they entered the house, Travis held out a towel for her. Laura's fingers brushed his, and she was startled by her own desire not to let go, but she did. She sat down near the wood stove, the warmth seeping into her bones, and closed her eyes for a moment. She could still feel the pressure of his arm around her. She could still feel the abyss beneath her feet, and the firmness with which he brought her back. And more than anything, she felt something growing inside her. Something dangerous. Something beautiful. Travis didn't say anything else. He went to Lily's room, checked to see if she was sleeping well, and then leaned against the living room wall, staring into the fire. Lavra watched him from the side. His face was partially illuminated, his eyes lost somewhere she couldn't reach. And yet, she felt like she wanted to try. For the first time in years, she wanted to try. Outside, the storm continued. But inside that house, something was changing. Something stronger than the cold, more intense than the past. Something that didn't yet have a name, but was already making its home. The next morning, the ranch looked as if it had been washed clean by God. Snow still covered the ground like a dirty white blanket, but the sky was clear, a blue that hurt the eyes. Lavra woke early, as usual, her muscles still aching from the previous night's exertion, and her body remembering having nearly fallen off a roof. She made coffee on the wood stove, rubbing her hands together to warm herself as the strong smell wafted through the kitchen. Travis was in the barn with Lily, teaching the girl how to feed the horses. She could see them through the window, and for a moment, she felt something very much like peace. Doubt it was, while tidying the living room, that it happened. The old rug he'd inherited from his mother was crooked, and as he pulled it straight, something stuck. A strange creak. A sound the floor hadn't made in years. Lavra frowned, knelt, and ran her hand over the wooden boards until she found the crack, a thin groove covered in dust and age. Using a kitchen knife, he carefully pried the board open. A dull snap. The wood gave way. And there, in that dark hole hidden between the years and memories, was a package. Tied with string and covered in aged fabric dot with trembling hands, Lavra pulled out the package. Inside were 7 letters, folded and neatly packed. The smell was of old ink and lamp oil. The first envelope was addressed to her father, John Grant, and bore a Missoula postmark dated 1984. Laura's heart beat faster. She opened the first letter. "John, they came last night. They said that if you don't sell the Silver Creek land, something bad will happen. It's not just a threat on paper. They know where your daughter goes to school. Think about it. R. Her blood ran cold. She read the second, the third. They all spoke of the same thing. The Sierra Timber Syndicate, an organization buying up land at any cost and not caring who had to disappear along the way. Lavra was still sitting on the ground when Travis entered. His boots were wet with snow, and he wore a watchful expression. "Lavra?" She looked up at him, handing him the letter without saying anything. He walked over, read the contents, and frowned. "Sierra Timber," he murmured. "I know that name." His breathing grew heavier. "They took my uncle's ranch in Idaho in 1993. They burned barns, released cattle, and falsified sales documents. My father tried to fight back. He died of a heart attack 2 months later." He stared at Lavra, his eyes filled with the past. "They're not rumors. They're real." She took a deep breath, her fingers still gripping the edges of the letters tightly. "My father never sold. He preferred to die rather than sign." Travis nodded slowly, and it seems he knew he was being hunted. The silence between them was heavy, dense, as if the entire ranch were holding its breath. For the first time, Lavra felt she wasn't crazy for doubting the 1992 accident. For the first time, someone believed her without question. Travis bent down, picked up one of the letters, and read it again. "We have to do something. This could be proof. This could be the game changer." Lavra swallowed hard. "Are you really willing to get involved in this? They destroyed your family." Travis stared at her firmly. "And yours too. I'm not running away anymore. I'm tired of living like no one could trust me. I'm tired of staying in the shadows." She stared at him for a long time, as if searching for cracks in his courage. But she found only truth. For the first time in years, she believed in someone, trusted, and that trust hurt. Because it created space, and creating space was always dangerous. "There's a man in Bozeman, Paul Carrington. He was a friend of my father's, a land lawyer," she said quietly. "If anyone can understand what these letters mean, it's him." Travis nodded. "Then let's go to him." Lavra hesitated. "I can't leave the ranch alone," he answered immediately. "You won't be alone. We'll go together." She didn't answer. She just stared at the letters on the table. Proof that the past hadn't been buried. It was just waiting for the right moment to emerge. That night, Lavra tucked the letters into an antique leather bag, the same one her father used to carry field tools. And when he zipped it shut, he felt as if he were readying a weapon. A weapon made of memory, blood, and truth. Outside, the wind had died down. But inside the house, the storm was beginning to gather. The next morning, Silver Creek Ranch woke earlier than the sun. Travis was already in the pasture, tossing hay to the cows while Lily followed with small steps, trying to imitate her father's every move. Laura watched from the porch, coffee mug in hand and a tight knot in her chest. That child, so small and already so aware of the world, awakened in her a tenderness she had long believed dead. When Lily looked back and waved, her eyes shining in the cold dawn light, Lavra waved back shyly. And for the first time in years, she smiled before 8 in the morning. After breakfast, Lily appeared in the kitchen with her boots askew and a simple request. "Aunt Laura, can I help tend the horses today?" The title caught Laura off guard. She wasn't ma'am as before. She was aunt. A small word, but full of intimacy. She pretended not to be moved. "Of course you can, but you have to promise not to let old Bruno out without my permission. He still thinks he's a stud." Lily laughed softly, a shy laugh that seemed to light up the entire kitchen. And there, in that simple moment, Laura realized something was changing. slowly, like snow melting and revealing the living grass beneath Dot in the stable. Lavra taught Lily how to brush the horses' coats with gentle strokes. They sense everything, you know. If you're sad, they notice. If you're scared, ... too. Girl listened attentively, her eyes wide, as if each word were a magical secret. Then they went to the small garden behind the house. The ground was still frozen, but a few dried lavender sprigs held firm. Laura carefully picked one and handed it to the girl. Plants are stubborn too. Even when everything seems against them, they insist on growing. We could learn from them. Later, sitting in the shade of the barn, Travis and Lavra shared a thermos of tea while Lily played with a newborn lamb. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was comfortable. Until Travis, staring out at the field, murmured, "You?" "No, she hasn't called anyone Auntie since her mother died." Lavra stared at him, surprised. He continued, without taking his eyes off the horizon. "We were crossing Northern California, heading to my sister's house. The road was bad. The signs were even worse. The truck hit a fallen log. They said later that the timber company knew that route was doomed, but nobody did anything." Laura didn't respond immediately. She just listened. And that's when Travis spoke, perhaps for the first time to anyone. "I tried to get her out of the car, but it was too late. Lily saw everything. She was silent for weeks, and I became a ghost inside." His voice broke at the end, but he held it. Lavra felt the air between them thicken. Sharing pain was like opening a wound in front of someone, but it was also the only way to heal. That road was maintained by the same company, Sierra Timber. They don't just kill land. They kill people, ... and stories. She touched his arm gently. "They took my father. But if they think they're going to take anything else from here, they'll find out we chose to survive." Travis looked at her with an expression that mixed surprise and relief, as if finally he was no longer fighting alone. From then on, it wasn't just about hidden documents or disputed land. It was about rebuilding what had been broken, about turning pain into foundation. And the two of them, for the first time, were on the same side of the fence. That evening, they sat with Lily near the fireplace. She asked Travis to tell the story of the horse that ran away with the sheriff's hat again. He told it in a light voice with exaggerated gestures, and Lavra laughed more than she intended. The sound of her laughter made Travis pause for a second. He looked at her differently, like someone watching a field bloom after a long winter. And Lavra, noticing this, lowered her gaze, blushing like a teenager. As Lily fell asleep with her head in Laura's lap, the house fell silent. Travis approached slowly. He sat on the rug across from her and said softly, "I never thought I'd see this again, a home." Laura didn't respond with words, but in that silence, she gave everything. Her still wounded heart, the pieces she'd been picking up alone for years, and the space she was unknowingly opening for them. That night, no one said goodnight, but everyone slept as if embraced by something stronger than time: hope. The afternoon was falling lazily over Silver Creek when the sound of hooves shattered the peace. Lavra was in the chicken coop, gathering eggs with Lily, and Travis was chopping wood on the bank beside the barn. The sound was slow, rhythmic, deliberate, as if each step warned her that nothing here was casual. Lavra looked up and saw him. A large, restless black horse, ridden by a man in a brown coat and a hat too new for the mud. His boots were polished, his expression icy. He didn't dismount in a hurry. He didn't look like someone with anything to lose. Lily instinctively backed away from Lara, who clutched the egg bucket tightly, as if it were a weapon. Travis, noticing her presence, dropped the axe, the blade embedded in the trunk, and walked steadily forward, his sweaty shirt clinging to his back. The man dismounted with calculated elegance, pulled an envelope from his coat, and approached the porch as if he already knew the way. "Good afternoon," he said, with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "My name is Walter Finch. I represent the legal interests of Sierra Timber." The name fell like a bucket of cold water over the ranch. Travis stopped beside Laura, the two of them side by side, forming an invisible wall. "This is no place for a mob lawyer," he said firmly. Finch ignored him. He opened the envelope and held out the paper like someone handing out a wedding invitation. "Your father owed the forestry cooperative money. This court document proves that the Silver Creek land is under lien. You have 72 hours to vacate the property." Laura didn't take the paper. She just looked at it with a mixture of anger and disgust. "My father didn't owe you anything. And if he did, I'd rather die here than hand over what he protected with his life." Finch tried to keep his tone calm, but his voice had subtly sharpened. "Denying the document's legitimacy only makes the situation more difficult. The men I represent don't like delay, much less disobedience." That was when Travis stepped forward, his eyes fixed like a guard dog. "The next word out of your mouth could cost you your teeth, Doctor." Finch took a half step back, as if realizing this ranch wasn't like the others he'd been accustomed to. Then, with a practiced movement, he held out the paper once more, and Laura snatched it from his hand. She read every line with fiery eyes. The signatures were fake. The notary seal was too old. And the judge's name? Dead for 2 years. "You don't even try to hide the lie anymore, do you?" She tore the paper into 4 pieces and threw it at Finch's feet, who looked at them as if he'd been slapped. "The next visit won't be so polite," he said, already turning away. "Promise or threat?" Travis growled. The man mounted his horse nimbly and answered over his shoulder, "Both." And he vanished the way he came, leaving behind the smell of danger. And the taste of war. Laura stood still for a few seconds. Lily, clutching her skirt, trembled. Travis placed his hand on Laura's shoulder. "He'll be back." She nodded. And next time, he might not come alone. It was then that fear gave way to something stronger. Fury, memory, courage. Laura took a deep breath. "We're going to Bozeman. Early tomorrow morning." Travis narrowed his eyes. "Do you have anyone there?" "A lawyer, Paul Carrington. He was a friend of my father's. If anyone can prove this land is still ours, it's him." Travis nodded. "Then we'll go together. I'll take care of Lily. You take care of the truth." That night, the house slept with the lights on. Travis locked all the doors and slept on the couch with his shotgun beside him. Laura, in her room, reread her father's letters as if talking to a ghost. Lily slept clutching the blanket and the bouquet of lavender Laura had given her hours earlier. No noise came from the road, but the entire ranch seemed on alert. And yet there was strength in those walls. For the first time, it wasn't just fear. It was readiness. Before going to sleep, Laura wrote a sentence on a piece of paper she left. On the kitchen table, "They took my father. They won't take my place." Travis read it when he went to get coffee that morning. He smiled inside, and he knew this woman was no longer defending herself. She was in combat. Dawn arrived in Silver Creek, the sky heavy, tinged with gray and silent, as if even the birds knew something important was about to happen. Laura woke before the grandfather clock's alarm rang, put on her mother's wool coat, and arranged her father's papers inside a weathered leather briefcase. Travis was already in the truck when she got out with Lily in his arms. The still drowsy girl settled into the back seat, hugging the blanket. "Are you sure you want to go?" he asked. Laura just nodded. "I'm not going to run anymore. It's time for them to run from me." The road to Bozeman was long and winding, lined with pine trees and mountains that seemed to hold secrets. The AM radio hissed between an 80s song and the weather forecast. No forecast, however, could anticipate what Lara carried in her soul. Travis drove steadily, his hands on the wheel with the same strength he used to hold back everything he didn't. Say Lily slept soundly, as if the movement of the road lulled her. And for a few minutes, the silence in the car was more comfortable than any conversation. They arrived at Paul Carrington's office late in the morning. It was a red brick building in the old town center, with a simple sign on the glass door. Paul was a thin man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see more than they should. When Lavra entered and said his name, he stood slowly, as if time had stopped for a second. "John Grant's daughter?" She nodded. He gestured to the chairs. "Sit down. We have much to discuss, and much more to protect." Paul read the letters in. Silence for long minutes. Each line seemed to confirm what he already suspected. When he finished, he took a folder from the metal cabinet and placed it on the table. "Your father already knew this might happen. In 1985, he filed a copy of the ranch's registration and enclosed it with a formal complaint about Sierra Timber. I kept everything, waiting for the right moment. It seems that moment has arrived." Lavra felt the ground shake beneath her feet. There was hope there, but also the harbinger of a war much greater than she had imagined. Paul explained that other farmers had disappeared, been bought out, or threatened. He showed a box of old photos. Smiling men and women at rural gatherings, Sunday barbecues, water distribution meetings. In one, John Grant stood next to a tall man with a thick beard and a tilted hat. Travis leaned closer and froze. "That one," he whispered. "That's Nolan's dad. My best friend from childhood. They took his land too." Paul nodded. "He's alive. He changed his name. He works at a gas station in Livingston, but he's never been the same." Lavra stared at the photo for a long time. The mafia wasn't just taking land. They were erasing history, destroying families, leaving no trace. This was more than a legal dispute. It was an attempt to silence an entire people. "What witnesses are still around?" Travis asked. Paul looked at them both seriously. "Few, and the ones that remain are being followed, threatened. One of them had his barn burned down last week." Lavra clenched her fists. "So that's it. They want the ranch because it still holds evidence. Because my father's name lives on." It was Travis who proposed. "What if we reunite the survivors? What if we bring these people face to face with the truth?" Paul smirked. "You want to start a revolution, son?" "No," he replied. "I want to finish one." With Paul's permission, they copied the documents, archived them digitally, took photos, and prepared to begin a formal lawsuit. There was no turning back. Silver Creek Ranch was now a symbol of resistance. On the way out, while Lily sucked, on a lollipop given to her by Paul's secretary, Travis found Nolan, his childhood friend, sitting on a park bench. His eyes were sunken, his beard unkempt, but his handshake was still strong. Travis hugged him. "They won't win this time." Nolan smiled for the first time in years. "I'm in." Lavra watched from a distance, her heart heavy. For the first time, they were no longer alone. And that changed everything. On the road back, Laura gazed at the clear sky and the mountains in the distance. The war had begun, but now she had weapons. She had allies, and above all, she had reasons. In the palm of her hand, she held the photo of her father beside those forgotten men. "They will remember each of you," she promised silently. Travis glanced at her in awe. For the first time, he saw in her what he hadn't known he was searching for: a home that fights. The ranch was too quiet when they arrived. The gravel road that used to squeak under tires now seemed to swallow the sound, as if the ground itself was waiting for something dark. Travis was the first to notice the main gate was ajar, the wires cut, and the entrance bell thrown to the ground. Lavra stopped the truck abruptly, and Lily woke with a start in the back seat. The smell of burning wood hung thick in the air, like a warning that came too late. Travis jumped out of the car silently, his eyes scanning the grounds as if expecting a gunshot. The north shed was destroyed. The doors hung off their hinges, tools scattered as if a fight had broken out inside. The hay storage shed had been ransacked, and the feed sacks ripped open in anger, not necessity. Lavra entered the space with a tight chest. She recognized the smell of spilled oil, the rust of the chains on the floor, and the bitter taste of invasion. This wasn't just destruction, it was a message. They had entered the heart of the house. They had touched what she had sworn to protect. "Stay with Lily," Travis said. "I'll go around back." But before Lavra could protest, two masked men emerged from the side of the barn like otherworldly figures. One carried an iron bar, the other a short, gleaming knife. Travis tried to react, but there was no time. The first blow landed in the ribs, the second in the shoulder. Lavra screamed, running with Lily across the porch as she heard the dull thud of blows and the muffled grunts of Travis falling to the ground. That's when her body reacted instinctively. Lavra walked through the kitchen door, grabbed her father's shotgun, which still rested behind the stove, and for the first time in years, felt the weight of the wood in her hands. The smell of old gunpowder was still there, mixed with the memory of the last shot I never wanted to repeat. But in that moment, fear gave way to fury. He came out the front of the house, his eyes burning, his breathing heavy, and pointed the gun firmly. "Let him go now," he shouted, his voice stronger than his own legs. The attackers froze for a second. One of them muttered, "It's her," and backed away. The shotgun trembled for a moment, but didn't lower. Travis lay on the ground, bleeding but conscious. The men hurriedly retreated, climbed into a dark pickup truck parked behind the barn, and disappeared down the side road, raising a trail of dust and shame. Lavra ran to Travis. She knelt beside him, her eyes welling, and whispered, "You're going to be okay? You hear me? I'm here." He tried to smile, but the pain overcame him. "I knew you could shoot." Lily cried on the porch, clutching the flannel shirt Lavra had dropped as she left. "I don't want to lose anyone else, Aunt Lara," she cried, her voice thin and desperate. Laura ran to her, wrapped her arms around her, and whispered in her ear, "You're not going." "Not this time." The girl's eyes closed against her chest, her sobs muffled by a hug too tight for words. Travis, even wounded, watched the scene and felt, beneath the pain, something stronger. He was no longer fighting alone. When the ambulance arrived, Laura refused to get in. "Take care of him," she told the paramedic. "I'll go in my car with her." Travis, lying on the stretcher, squeezed her hand before being taken away. "It won't stop here?" She nodded. "Not a chance." That night, Lavra cleaned the blood from the floor with her own hands, as if ending an old mourning. She gathered up the destroyed tools, put out the fire in the shed, and grabbed a pen and paper. She wrote a full account of what happened and enclosed it with her father's letters. The ranch would no longer be a tomb of silenced stories. In the last line of the report, she wrote, "No more running away." And then he signed with his full name, in firm handwriting, like someone who finally recognizes herself as an heir, like someone who chooses to fight with everything they have, with land, with memory, and with love. The Missoula courthouse wasn't large, but that day it seemed to carry the weight of an entire state. The doors creaked open, the wooden benches were harder than usual, and the whispers fell silent as Lavra Grant entered, head held high, wearing the same brown coat as her father. Beside her, Travis walked with a firm step, despite the bandages on his shoulder and ribs. Lily, dressed in a simple dress, and her hair tied with the ribbon Laura had given her last Christmas, held Aunt Laura's hand with the strength of someone who knew the importance of being there. Paul Carrington, the gray-haired lawyer, was already waiting for them with documents in hand. The letters, the registration records, the neighbors' reports, and even the photos of the damage to the warehouse. Everything was organized, numbered, and ready to be delivered. In the opposite corner of the room, Walter Finchnow, in a tie, and with a different name on his badge, was leafing through a folder full of well-written lies. Beside him, a young, vain, and self-assured lawyer was chewing over his arguments with a mocking smile. "They'll try to paint you as crazy," Paul warned as they approached the table. Lavra nodded. "Then let them try. I've learned to live among worse people." The hearing began formally and in a neutral tone. But it wasn't long before Sierra Timber's lawyer stood up theatrically, accusing Lavra of fabricating the letters. "There is no authenticity in the documents presented," he said with the confidence of someone who believed he was above the truth. "There is no evidence that these threats were real. The plaintiff's father may have been involved in shady dealings. Family testimony cannot be trusted." Lavra clenched her fists but kept her gaze fixed on the judge. When the moment came, she stood up herself. He spoke with the firm voice of someone who carries the story in their bones. He told them about the compartment in the floor, about the threats his father hid for years, about the destruction of the warehouse and the attack that nearly took Travis's life. The judge listened in silence, taking notes calmly, but his eyes seemed to absorb every word. The mob lawyer tried to laugh. "Too convenient, don't you think? Letters appearing out of nowhere. Emotional testimony. Nothing concrete." Paul stood. "Then let's hear from someone who saw it." Everyone turned, and it was Lily who rose from her chair. The entire room fell silent. She walked to the front with short steps, stopped before the microphone, and said, her voice small but clear, "I saw the men hurt my father. I saw them break everything. I saw the face of one of them when the mask fell off. It was the same one who came here before. The one in the brown coat." The judge blinked, as if something had gone through him. "Are you saying you recognize the man who was at the ranch?" Lily nodded. "He said he would be back, and he was back, with 2 others. The mob lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up his hand. "Let the girl speak." And then the twist. A man in an old hat and a sunburned face stood up at the back of the room. "Your Honor," he said, "my name is Henry Walters. I worked for Sierra Timber for 12 years. I have documents, photos, receipts. They forged everything. They bought notaries, and I don't want to carry this alone anymore." The judge called for silence while the officers collected the new pile of evidence. Finch's face drained of color. Lavra looked at Travis, who smiled with his eyes. The wall was beginning to crumble. The tension was palpable. The judge gathered everything, calmly closed the papers, and said, "This court will consider the new evidence. The decision will be delivered tomorrow at 10. Murmurs spread through the room. Travis squeezed Laura's shoulder. Paul Carrington smiled as if he knew the tables had turned. But no one celebrated. Not yet. Because there, in that courtroom, the silence was still louder than any applause. As they left, the sun was already setting over the rooftops of Missoula, gilding the windows like promises. Lavra looked up at the sky. "Dad, tomorrow, we'll go home with your name cleared." Travis took her hand, not as if offering support, but as if joining in a pact. Lily bounced back and forth, oblivious to her fear, as if she already knew the worst was behind her. But no one slept well that night, because hope is a candle, and sometimes the wind blows strongest just before dawn. The next morning arrived with the sky as clear as glass and the air so still it seemed to hold the world's breath. At 10 o'clock sharp, Lavra, Travis, and Lily were seated again in the courtroom. Laura's hands clutched the folder containing her father's documents, but this time it wasn't for defense, it was for honor. The judge entered the room with firm steps, carrying the sentence as if carrying the truth on his shoulders. The silence was absolute, and the sound of a page turning sounded like thunder. After reviewing the evidence, the testimony, and the official records, he said, "I declare that the Silver Creek Ranch shall remain the rightful property of Laura Grant." The world stopped for a second. Lavra didn't cry or smile. She just closed her eyes and felt the weight of decades melt from her shoulders. Travis hugged her tightly, his face buried in her neck. Lily jumped onto the bench and wrapped her thin arms around Laura's waist. It was as if everything had aligned at once. Her father, her past, the ranch, the letters. Everything made sense now. Across the room, Walter Finch was discreetly handcuffed by 2 federal agents. Henry's testimony and the documents revealed the syndicate's connections to fraud, extortion, and environmental crimes. They would take nothing more. Not land, not names, not lives. As they left the courthouse, the air felt different. People greeted Laura with discreet nods, as if silently acknowledging the strength of someone who never bowed. Paul Carrington squeezed her hand and said, "Your father would be so proud." Travis led Lily to his truck. As Lavra approached, he turned to her, his eyes teary but firm. "I know I came here for a roof over my head, but I want to stay for love." Lavra was silent for a moment. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Not a shy kiss, but a kiss filled with everything that had been bottled up for too long. The ride back was silent, but not the kind that weighs on you. It was a comfortable, mature silence, full of meaning. When they reached Silver Creek, Travis got out first and opened the gate as if opening the door to a new life. Lavra stared at the house, now illuminated by the soft afternoon light. It was the same as always, but it felt different, more alive, lighter. Lily ran toward the stable, where the horses whinnied as if they, too, knew everything had changed. Later, with night already falling over the countryside, Lavra entered the girl's room and saw her sleeping with her arm around the stuffed lamb Travis had given her. A strand of hair fell across her face, and there was a small smile there, almost imperceptible. Laura approached and adjusted the blanket over her. She took a deep breath. For the first time, that house had the sound of life, not just footsteps, not just voices, but of soul, of belonging, of home. The next day, Lavra woke early. She grabbed her hammer and some new boards and headed out into the field. Travis followed her silently, as he always did. Atop the ranch's oldest fence, they began rebuilding together, board by board, nail by nail, as if each new piece were a promise that there, nothing would be ripped out by force, that there, everything would be planted with love. Travis hammered in the last nail and looked at her. "She's getting pretty," Laura smirked. "She's gotten stronger, just like me." In the distance, the wind blew gently. The storm had passed, but love, that had just arrived to stay. And if this story touched your heart as much as it did mine, don't leave without leaving a comment. Tell me, when were you most moved? Was it when Lily found the courage to testify? When Lavra held the shotgun for the first time? Or that kiss that said everything they felt without words? I read every message with care, and you can be sure your opinion helps keep this channel alive. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Click the red button below and activate the bell. Here you'll find exciting, inspiring, and twist-filled stories every week. And tell me, Which city or country are you watching from? I want to know where these stories are going and who's experiencing it all with me. Until the next video. And remember, no matter how great your pain, love always finds a way to come back.